Now, by a stacked tower, I mean a tower that has various architectural elements or sections stacked on top of one another. So above the clock, we have a colonnaded square, and then we have some terraces, and then we have a smaller colonnaded square, then we have a colonnaded cylinder, and then a smaller one on top. And these are all stacked on top of each other. And if we could look straight down from the top, they would all be centered on each other. And so the challenge with a stacked tower is to make all the different components, as they get higher and higher and usually smaller and smaller, is to have them nice and straight, to have them look like they've been built by an architect and not a toddler stacking blocks. So that's one of the challenges we're going to have, keeping all the vertical lines nice and vertical and aligning each section carefully on what we've drawn underneath. Now, although these are easy drawings for beginners, this probably isn't such an easy drawing, but I think it's an achievable one. You'll notice that I'm drawing it with a fairly loose line style. And that's a great style to have, because we don't have to be 100% precise with the first, second, or even third line. We have a little bit of flexibility to make adjustments, and you'll see me constantly doing that, as I just did then with those two lines, to adjust the perspective angles so that they were more accurate. Now, with these perspective angles, as we go higher, that angle will get higher and higher and higher. So that's an important thing to realize. It may not get higher very much, but it will still get higher. And we must always resist the urge just to draw the lines parallel, because while that won't make too much of a difference, say with these horizontal lines at the base of a set of columns, if we compare the horizontal line at the base of this section with the highest one, there is a discernible difference in the angle. And the higher we go, the greater the difference between that angle and the one below it. So you'll see me measuring my angles quite consistently with my pen. And we can use this method in real life as well if we're drawing on location, by holding our pen or pencil up in front of our eyes, getting the angle aligned with what we're actually looking at, and then bringing it straight down onto our paper. It sounds really bodgy, but it's remarkably accurate as a way of getting, or at least checking, the angle that we want to draw. So now I'm doing these couple of terraces. You'll notice that with those little decorations on the corner, I didn't get bogged down drawing the detail too much. The key thing about them is that round ball of stone. And so I drew those exactly where I wanted them to be, and I didn't worry too much about the support that holds them in place. Sometimes when the scale is very small, it's best just to draw the key visual part, so the little ball, and not worry about the stand that rose up from a base to hold it. In the same way, when I draw crowds of people in the street, I often don't draw their necks. I just draw their head and then their shoulders and leave a slight gap. And I find that often works better than trying to cram too much detail into the space. We can end up with such a blackness of lines that all touch that it actually becomes distracting from the overall object that we're trying to draw. So now I'm drawing the second square colonnaded structure on top. It can get very confusing working out what's column and what's gap. And so putting this shadow between them earlier rather than later is a very handy way of working that out. I got confused on several occasions. And now have the cylindrical part on top, which I've probably drawn just a fraction too wide and a fraction too tall. It is always helpful after we've drawn something to have a look and see, how did our proportions go? How did our angles go? Because the mistakes we tend to make in one drawing, we will tend to make that same type of mistake in our other drawings. If we tend to make things too wide, we'll tend to always make things too wide. If we tend to make them too tall, we'll tend to always make them too tall. If we tend to not have the perspective angle high enough, we'll tend to always keep our perspective angles a bit lower than they should be. So if we can identify what our natural tendency away from accuracy is when we draw, then we can be ready to compensate for it in our drawing. So now I've just got this little final bit on top, and then we have the final challenge of a stacked tower, and that's the spire, the flagpole or just pole on top. We really want to work hard that this is a nice brisk straight line that really does align nicely with the center line of the tower. So now I'm just making a few adjustments, and I'm also adding a little bit of decoration that we have under a few of these cornices where there are some little teeth, as I like to think of them. They have a more fancy Latin name, but I think it actually ends up being a Latin word for teeth as well. So now we start to come down the tower, and we have a few more decorations. We have these squares that I think hold speakers so that things can be broadcast to all the crowds. This tower is in San Francisco at Fisherman's Wharf. I think it could actually be the Port Authority building, but I'm not sure. I'm sure someone who sees this will know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. But I think it's the tower of the Port Authority building at Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco. So now I'm just giving a little bit of indication of some of the decorations here. This photo was taken on a very cloudy day, and I've adjusted it slightly on my camera app. But it does mean overall it doesn't have a huge number of shadows on them, except the really most obvious ones, because it was fairly diffuse lighting. So a few more little teeth along here. And then we've got the challenge of the clocks. Now this is a quick sketch. It is directly in ink. So I'm keeping my style fairly brisk, and I'm not laboring too much. And so these two ellipses for the clocks, yeah, probably not my best work, but I think given it's a fairly casual line work for the overall drawing, I think they sit in happily enough. But don't be tempted to leave more difficult parts of a drawing out. I mean, it would have been easy enough not to draw the clocks, but we don't actually learn when we do that. It's only by not seeing that this artwork has to be a finished artwork, that every drawing has to be a masterpiece, that particularly a drawing that we do, as for me this one was in 10 minutes, in 15 minutes, then we really should be seeing things as exercises as much as artworks. So this drawing is time and a half in terms of the speed. I took 15 minutes to draw it, and I've sped it up slightly so that you can watch it in 10 minutes. So with the clocks done, there's pretty much nothing more to do except to start to look around at the tower, and are there any lines that obviously don't look right, any things that I can correct at this point. Sometimes it's too late to make any corrections, but lots of times we can just shift an angle. It's always good to stand back from our table, desk, whatever, and to look at the drawing again, looking for something that now doesn't look quite right, trying to see it with fresh eyes. So just putting a bit of the shadow onto the clocks. And then I think I've pretty much finished. You'll find this photo on my channel community page if you want to print off a copy and have a go drawing a stacked tower yourself. Why not give it a go? See what you can draw in 15 or 20 minutes. It's a great subject when you just have a little bit of time available. G'day, I'm Stephen Travis. I hope you found this helpful, or at the very least interesting. Why not give it a go yourself? And if you haven't subscribed, please hit subscribe, and also notifications, and that way you'll know when I post new videos. I'd appreciate any comments that you have or suggestions for things, subjects I could use for future videos.